Has Chicago reached that tipping point where people finally say, look, enough is enough. I'm switching from Democrat to Republican, something that city hasn't seen in decades, if not like centuries?
Definitely. And that is because we see that the Democratic Party has decided to do away with us. And so we're fine with that. And so we're going to do away with them.
Chicago residents are finally starting to realize that the Democratic Party has always taken advantage of them, disrespected them, disregarded them, and had no intentions of correcting the situations that the Democratic Party and the liberals have caused. You have to understand something about Chicago. Chicago has been a Democratic stronghold for almost a century, and Illinois is just as bad as Chicago. And so what does that mean? What does that mean for the residents of the city of Chicago? That means that those residents are living under the one-party rule since the beginning of the previous century. And when you have that one party that is bent on instituting Marxism, bent on instituting progressive policies that lead to the detriment of the citizenry, but leads to the increase in wealth for those who are pushing this system, what does that do? That leads to increased crime, increased homelessness, lack of opportunity, lack of education for the children of those residents. And what has the city of Chicago done on top of that? Now they are opening up their doors to migrants to come in and continue to insult the residents of the city of Chicago.
Chicago's in crisis. Lifelong residents fed up with the condition of the Windy City, which has seen a 16% jump in crime, over 14,000 migrants living in the city, and a 14% rise in homelessness. But now some residents want solutions that sound a lot like Republican priorities.
We don't have enough room for the migrants. We don't have support services.
We must close the southern border. We cannot really take care of more migrants coming to Chicago.
Chicago resident and activist Mark Carter and Chicago resident Kata Truss say they're done with the Democratic Party in Chicago, want to flip the city red in 2024. They both join me now. Thanks for being here. Mark, start with you. Has Chicago reached that tipping point where people finally say, look, enough is enough. I'm switching from Democrat to Republican, something that city hasn't seen in decades, if not like centuries?
Definitely. And that is because we see that the Democratic Party has decided to do away with us. And so we're fine with that. And so we're going to do away with them. And with that, we say to Donald Trump, come to Chicago and meet with us. This city not only has decided to do away with us, but they have come up with a plan called the Office of New Americans, which is attached to a bigger plan across the country. So we say this to all of our people across the country. The bigger plan is Cities for Action. Cities for Action is where over 200 mayors and county executives have decided to take care of immigrants over Americans. And so since they've decided, since the blue has decided to do away with us, then we've decided to go red and do away with them. And so the organizing begins.
Before we get to Kata, I want to focus on Trump because you just mentioned him. What about him? He does seem to have a newfound popularity within the black community that you did not see in 2020. Why do you think that is?
Well, you know, it took a while for people to cozy up and warm up to Donald Trump. I heard his message the first time. I understood that the Democratic Party had done just that, done away with our community. And so I'm one of the ones who was already Team Trump a long time ago. I knew that he would push that immigration plan to push these people back into their country, to close the border. And Joe Biden did the exact opposite as soon as he got in office. And so when you hear them speak of what Abbott is doing, we don't want to hear that conversation about Abbott without addressing what Joe Biden is doing. They couldn't make it to Texas in order to get to Chicago without the border being opened up.
Kata, you heard Mark say the phrase, done away with our communities, about 3 times in his answers. Why do Democrats in Chicago, and quite frankly, Democrats nationwide, bite the hand that feeds them? Why are they ignoring the black voters, the black communities that ultimately got them elected in favor of illegal migrants?
Well, one of the things that we have to pay attention to is the fact that the Democratic Party has always neglected to pay attention to the black community. That is traditional. And because we have been so committed to supporting that party, they feel that they can continue to disrespect us, to marginalize us, to not hear our voices. And so for myself, the turning point for me was when Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson decided that he would not listen to the voice of the people. And I'm not sure where he gets his marching orders from, but he's certainly not listening to the voice of the people. And when the people of Chicago came to City Hall to say to the mayor, we want our status as a sanctuary city ended, and we were virtually ignored, for me, that was a turning point. That was the nail in the coffin for me. I, at that point, decided, if you're not going to listen to me, if the party is not going to listen to us, and let me just say, I'm not going to put this solely on Brandon Johnson, because this is a Democratic state. And so most of our elected officials are Democratic. And so not only did Brandon Johnson not listen to us, but none of our other elected officials bothered to stand up and listen to us as well. And so my thing is this: if you're not going to listen to us, that's fine. We need to stand up and not necessarily do what our grandparents and our forefathers have done and go along to get along. We got to stand up and say, you know what? If the Democratic Party is not going to listen to us, if the Democratic Party is not going to stand up for the people that have supported this party, then it's time for us to make a change. Now, let me just say this as well. The Republican Party is not spotless, but we do need to say at this point, it's time to do something different. You can't keep doing the same old thing and expecting a different outcome. And so that is why it is so important for the citizens of Chicago to turn Chicago red.
Spot on those answers. And when it comes to the Republican Party, I will say they could do a lot better in the inner cities if they focused on Black and Latino education. I've been saying this for years now, not funneling more money into it and helping the teachers unions get rich, but making sure that Black and Latino students actually get a real education and not lip service. It is disgusting what we do to those communities, and it needs to stop.
And as you can see, it looks like that they want to paint the city red. Now, that is a lofty goal that's very ambitious. Will it happen? I'm not sure, because Chicago, Illinois, and the black community itself has been such a Democratic stronghold that I'm under the impression that it's going to take an abolitionist type of mentality to come in and recognize that people have been under bondage for so long that you have to teach them. You have to teach them what it means to be independent, because they've been conditioned for generations to be dependent upon the government. And that's part of the trick that the liberals and the progressives have done. They've made generations of people, black people, dependent upon the government. So whenever they push in these migrants through Brandon Johnson, utilizing Brandon Johnson to bring in these migrants to take away from the residents of the city, you have a small group of people speaking out against it. But you know what the liberals and the Marxists and the progressives are banking on? That they've created such a dependency upon government in the mindset, in the psyche of black residents, that those black residents do not want to stand on their feet. That those black residents do not understand that they have agency, that those black residents would rather suffer under the tyranny of progressivism, suffer under the tyranny of a government that does not listen to them, of councilmen, of aldermen, of a mayor, of a governor that does not listen to them instead of branching out and deciding to do something different. That is the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. Why do you think Chicago is so unsafe in certain parts? And it's only primarily the black and brown part. Why do you think that is? Why do you think you have these same people who've been living in poverty for generations? If you've been controlled by one party for so long, wouldn't you think their policies would lead to prosperity, will lead to some type of beneficial progress that you will be able to measure over the years? But it hasn't. And they're banking on their instilling of a dependent mindset upon the government to keep these people in their place and then replace them with the migrants, because that's what they're doing. They are discarding the black vote in place of the migrants. They would rather, they have this thing called the Office of a New America, and they're starting these particular offices in a lot of different cities. And they're pushing this because they recognize that they have a new voting bloc that they can bring in from all across Central and South America to come in and take the place of black people. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're doing this systematically, and they're starting it in these cities with these black leaders, with these liberal leaders, because they know these people will not push back. And they're using the cover of these black leaders to do this. Now, the question is, will the citizens rise up and understand that the government is making them victims? Will they keep a victim mindset? Will they stay in their same state? Or will they recognize, throw the shackles off of their shoulders, throw the shackles off of their back, and recognize that they have been trapped mentally, that they have been enslaved mentally to accept lower standards? They've been enslaved mentally to accept the soft bigotry of low expectations. Will they do that? It's glad to see that people are speaking out against it. It's glad to see that you have a spark of revolution in Chicago. Chicago will be the ground zero of this year. We will see. Will there be a big difference when it comes to how the city of Chicago votes? And I encourage people of the Republican Party to actually go in and talk to them. I encourage them to do that. Will they do that? Probably not, because the Republican Party has no interest in expanding their tent to bring in more black people. They have no interest in that. And so it is incumbent upon biblical conservatives, it is incumbent upon black conservatives to hear the cries, to hear what the people are saying in the city of Chicago, and to go in and execute, to go in with the ground game, to go to these doors, go to these communities, and tell them about conservative principles in a way that will not alienate them, in a way that will show them that it is time for a change.